Masculinity is a complex and multifaceted concept that resists simple definition because it encompasses a diverse range of expressions shaped by cultural, historical, and geographical factors. Beynon emphasizes that masculinity should not be seen as a singular or standardized identity but as masculinities, a pluralized idea that reflects the variety and fragmentation inherent in how masculinity is experienced and enacted. While male biology is a constant, masculinity itself is a cultural construct influenced by factors such as class, ethnicity, age, and sexuality. This diversity highlights the idea that masculinity is not innate or universal, but rather a learned behavior molded by specific societal expectations and norms. The term masculinities, therefore, serves as a critical lens to scrutinize how different groups and individuals interpret and perform gender roles in culturally specific ways. Beynon challenges the idea of a fixed or stable masculinity. Masculinity, far from being a natural or immutable essence, is depicted as a fluid, mobile, and unstable construction. Historical and cultural shifts have significantly impacted the ways in which masculinity is understood and performed. For example, traditional ideals of masculinity, often connected to physical strength, dominance, and stoicism, have been scrutinized and deconstructed, particularly under the influence of feminist and LGBTQ movements. These critiques have exposed the cultural and performative aspects of masculinity, demonstrating that gender roles are not biologically predetermined but are shaped by societal and cultural forces. The influence of globalization and consumer culture has further diversified the expressions of masculinity, with men adopting varied roles and lifestyles that defy traditional norms. Hegemonic masculinity, a key concept introduced by Beynon, refers to the dominant and socially accepted ways of being a man at specific times in particular places. This form of masculinity often marginalizes alternative masculinities, creating a hierarchy where certain expressions of masculinity are valorized while others are subordinated or stigmatized. Hegemonic masculinity is sustained through societal institutions, cultural narratives, and individual performances that reinforce power dynamics and gender norms. For example, the workplace often serves as a site where hegemonic masculinity is enacted, with professional success and dominance being equated with masculinity. However, this dominance is neither static nor universally applicable. It evolves in response to cultural, economic, and social changes. The rise of alternative masculinities, such as the new man who embraces emotional expressiveness and domestic roles, reflect a broader shift in gender expectations. However, these alternatives often coexist with traditional forms of masculinity, creating a dynamic interplay between continuity and change. The historical evolution of masculinity is another critical theme. The Industrial Revolution, for instance, established a division between the public and private spheres, associating men with work and women with domesticity. This separation reinforced patriarchal structures by positioning men as breadwinners and women as caregivers. Over time, this model of masculinity has been challenged by economic and social transformations, such as the entry of women into the workforce and the decline of traditional industries. The post World War periods further disrupted traditional gender roles as men's experiences in combat and subsequent struggles with reintegration into civilian life highlighted the psychological and emotional costs of adhering to rigid masculine norms. These historical shifts underscore the fragility and contingency of masculinity, demonstrating that it is a product of specific socio-historical conditions rather than a timeless or universal truth. Beynon explores the intersectionality of masculinity, emphasizing that gender identity is shaped by a confluence of factors, including class, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. Working class masculinities, for example, have often been associated with physical labor, toughness, and camaraderie. These traits, while celebrated within certain subcultures, can also serve to reinforce power hierarchies and marginalize alternative expressions of masculinity. Middle class masculinities, on the other hand, are frequently linked to professional success, intellectual competence, and emotional restraint. These distinctions highlight the ways in which class dynamics shape the performance and perception of masculinity. Similarly, racial and ethnic intersect with masculinity, producing unique configurations that challenge dominant narratives. The experiences of Black, Asian, and other marginalized groups reveal how masculinity is negotiated within specific cultural and historical contexts, often in response to systematic racism and exclusion. The role of sexuality in shaping masculinity is another significant focus. Beynon critiques the heteronormative framework that has historically defined masculinity, arguing that it excludes and stigmatizes non heterosexual identities. The gay movement, for instance, has played a crucial role in challenging traditional notions of masculinity by introducing alternative expressions that celebrate diversity and fluidity. However, these alternatives have also faced resistance and co-optation, as seen in the commercialization of certain gay looks in mainstream culture. This dynamic illustrates the ongoing struggle to redefine masculinity in ways that are inclusive and equitable. The concept of performativity, borrowed from Butler, is particularly relevant here because it underscores the idea that gender is not an equality but a set of behaviors and practices that are socially constructed and enacted. By viewing masculinity as performative, the document invites readers to question and deconstruct the norms and assumptions that underpin gender identities. Consumer culture and globalization have further complicated the landscape of masculinity. The rise of the metrosexual man, characterized by a focus on grooming fashion and lifestyle, reflects the increasing commodification of masculinity. This trend highlights the ways in which masculinity has become a site of consumption, with men being encouraged to express their identities through the acquisition of goods and services. Globalization has also given rise to transnational business masculinity, a form of masculinity associated with corporate power, egocentrism, and a declined sense of social responsibility. These developments reveal the shifting terrain of masculinity in a globalized world, where traditional boundaries are increasingly blurred. However, they also raise questions about the sustainable and ethical implications of these new forms of masculinity, particularly in terms of their impact on social and environmental justice. Beynon addresses the challenges and contradictions inherent in the study of masculinity. It critiques essentialist perspectives that seek to define masculinity in biological terms, arguing that such approaches fail to account for the cultural and historical variability of gender. Instead, it advocates for a culturalist approach that examines masculinity as a social construct shaped by specific contexts and power dynamics. This perspective allows for a more nuanced understanding of how masculinity functions within different settings, from schools and workplaces to media and popular culture. However, he also acknowledges the limitations of existing research, noting that the concept of masculinity remains ill defined and often conflated with male behavior. This lack of clarity poses significant challenges for scholars and practitioners seeking to address issues related to gender and identity. Beynon concludes by emphasizing the importance of critical inquiry and self reflection in understanding masculinity. He encourages readers to question their assumptions and to consider the diverse ways in which masculinity is experienced and enacted. By highlighting the plurality and performativity of masculinity, he challenges the idea of a singular fixed identity and instead presents a vision of gender as a dynamic and contested terrain. This approach not only deepens our understanding of masculinity but also opens up possibilities for reimagining gender relations in more inclusive and equitable ways. Through its exploration of historical, cultural, and social dimensions, he provides a comprehensive framework for examining the complexities of masculinity and its implications for individuals and society at large.